The world's only superpower is in decline. The US has failed to defeat Russia in Ukraine. It's failing to contain China. It's facing dissent and rebellion in NATO. It's losing credibility. Its economic system is failing. The world is moving away from the US dollar. De-dollarization looms ahead. A time of rapid geopolitical change and great uncertainty looms ahead. Please subscribe and let's find out what's happening. This video is sponsored by US Gold Mining Incorporated. They are a gold producer. Their stock ticker is USGO on NASDAQ. Stay tuned until the end of this video to learn why this could be a strategic opportunity in the gold space. So in 1991, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the US reigned supreme as the world's sole superpower. It had achieved ultimate success. It had won the Cold War, and that's when America's slow decline began. By the mid-1990s, China began showing the first signs of emerging as a major global economy. After the 2007-2008 global financial crisis, China began to see itself as the next superpower in waiting. And in 2013, China began its massive Belt and Road initiative that seeks to connect China with Africa and Europe via land and maritime networks. The BRI is the vehicle that China hopes will allow it to surpass and eclipse the US as the world's largest economy. In 2017, US President Donald Trump announced US withdrawal from the Paris Agreement on climate change mitigation. This undermined America's global leadership and credibility. It signaled a diminished willingness to engage and cooperate with other nations. The next year, in 2018, Donald Trump withdrew the US from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, also known as the Iran nuclear deal, and the US reimposed economic sanctions on Iran. 3 years later, in 2021, China and Iran signed a 25-year strategic cooperation agreement in which China would invest $400 billion in Iran's economy over the time period in exchange for a steady and heavily discounted supply of oil from Iran. So the US withdrawal from the JCPOA worked in China's favor. Talk about abdicating the crown. Iran also resumed its uranium enrichment program. In March of this year, it was reported to have enriched uranium up to 83.7%, which is very close to nuclear weapons grade uranium, which is enriched to 90% or more. And Iran and China have completely bypassed the US dollar in their trade. They are now trading in the Chinese yuan and the Iranian rial. Iran is also now connected to Russia's payment system, the system for transfer of financial messages. So the financial channel between Iran and the rest of the world is being restored. The US sanctions on Iran are beginning to fail. Now, America's global leadership and credibility and prestige took another body blow in 2021 with the chaotic and disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. So the US essentially spent 20 years transferring power from the Taliban to the Taliban. And in the process, they gifted the Taliban nearly $100 billion worth of high-quality military equipment. So this was an unmitigated disaster with terrible optics reminiscent of the fall of Saigon in the spring of 1973 and possibly even worse. Now, when it comes to the Middle East, US-Saudi ties are worsening. Saudi Arabia is considered to be one of the US prime allies in the Middle East region. And the Americans have gone after the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman over the Khashoggi affair. And the US is now a major producer of oil, if not the major producer of oil worldwide. It no longer needs Saudi oil, and that's also contributed to the worsening of relations. As a consequence, we have seen a rapprochement between the Saudis and the Iranians, and both nations have credited China with bringing this about. So the Saudis and the Iranians had broken off diplomatic relations for quite a few years, and now they have re-established diplomatic relations. So they are now talking to each other, which is a significant step forward. So you have the Saudi-Iran rapprochement, and at the same time, we have a significant uptick and increase in the quality of the relations between the Saudis and the Chinese. The Chinese are investing in Saudi Arabia. They are buying large quantities of Saudi oil. The Saudis also have excellent relations with India, and the Saudis want to now become members a member of BRICS. So when it comes to the Saudi Arabia and China trade, they are now trading in the Chinese yuan, and there's also the possibility of a rupee real trade between Saudi Arabia and India. Now, the Arab League is moving away from the US. They recently welcomed Bashar al Assad, the president of war torn Syria, back into the fold in defiance of the US. So you can see the Middle East moving away from the US and defying the US. And then we had the Ukraine war, which began in February 2022. The US threw the kitchen sink at Russia in terms of sanctions. And yet the US sanctions failed for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's because Russia adopted the gold standard. The Russians pegged the ruble to a fixed quantity of gold, 5,000 rubles for 1 gram of gold. So this turned the Russian ruble into a proxy for actual gold, and Russia has the gold reserves to back this up. Further, Russia happens to be an autarky, which means that it is self sufficient in all essential resources, such as oil and gas and petroleum products and iron and coal and minerals and fertilizers and agricultural products and much more. So Russia does not need to import any of these items, and that's why once again the US sanctions have not really been effective. Now the Ukraine conflict is essentially a proxy war between the US and NATO on one hand and Russia on the other side. And well, from all accounts, we can see the results of the war on the map. Russia is now in control of roughly a quarter of Ukraine, roughly 20-25% of Ukraine, the Donbas region. So, once again, NATO or the US has not succeeded there. The Russians have kind of achieved some of their objectives. And Russian gas supplies to Europe have stopped. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline has been destroyed. As a consequence, Europe is now starved of cheap Russian oil energy, and they are now forced to purchase that oil from the US at 3 to 4 times the price that they were paying to the Russians. So that's the situation in Europe, and the European economic engine has stalled as a consequence. Germany has entered recession. Other European nations may be on the verge of entering recession. So that's the situation there. The Russians have transferred nuclear warheads to Belarus. So that's a setback for the US. And India and China are benefiting from abundant and super cheap Russian oil. So it's very clear when it comes to the Ukraine conflict that Russia isn't losing. The US has not succeeded in destroying the Russian economy with sanctions, and they have not succeeded in winning the Ukraine war via their proxy, which is Ukraine. So the US media, the Western media, can spin this in whichever way they want, but the world can see what's going on. America's global preeminence is visibly declining. And meanwhile, there is trouble and dissent within NATO. So NATO is facing various strains as the US has questioned the value of its commitments, and the US has demonstrated an inclination towards unilateral decision making within NATO. This has eroded trust among the NATO allies and weakened NATO's responses to the challenges it faces. Now let's take the example of Turkey. Turkey is a very important nation within NATO. It's a strategically important NATO member because of its geographical location in the Middle East and Europe. Turkey controls the passage between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. It's the alliance's second largest military power. It hosts US tactical nuclear warheads on its territory. And Turkey is now currently blocking Sweden's accession to NATO. The US would like Sweden to become a part of NATO. Sweden would like to become a part of NATO, but Turkey is disregarding US pressure and is vetoing Sweden's bid to join NATO. Let's take the example of France. So, France has never been really happy being a part of NATO. I have it on good authority that French intelligence regards the US as an adversarial nation, and recently France has been especially angered by the US when the US forced Australia to abandon its submarine deal with France and opt instead for super expensive US nuclear submarines in its place. So the French President Monsieur Emmanuel Macron has sought an invitation recently to attend the forthcoming BRICS summit, which is going to be held in South Africa in August. So France now seeks access to the RIC nations, Russia, India, China, and BRICS as an extension of that. And France is in a rather unique position. France is the only non US NATO member that has an independent nuclear capability and a semi independent, quasi independent foreign policy. France has broken up with NATO before, it may do so again. And as US power declines, France may want to actually sign on with the global south and BRICS. So France is beginning to show signs of wanting to do that. And if that happens, NATO may not survive for long. So this brings us to BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, the coalition of these five nations. BRICS is rising. The five BRICS countries together contribute nearly 31.5% of the global GDP compared to 30.7% of the G7 nations. So BRICS has already eclipsed the global north in total GDP, and it's rising. So BRICS is becoming increasingly attractive to the global south. Almost 20 countries have applied to join BRICS: Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, Algeria, Bahrain, Indonesia, Argentina, Mexico, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Venezuela, Iran, Kazakhstan, Turkey, Syria, and Nicaragua. Amongst these nations, Turkey is a member of NATO, and Saudi Arabia is a close US ally. And yet they want to become part of BRICS. So we are entering an era of multipolarity, a multipolar world order. The great powers and the middle powers are coming together, and the superpower can no longer call all the shots. Now, the BRICS nations are working on creating a BRICS currency. This new BRICS currency, which is being discussed, will reportedly be backed by gold, rare earth metals, and the other natural resources of the BRICS members. And the expansion of BRICS will bring in the vast natural resources of the new members. So, for example, India has recently discovered enormous quantities of lithium ore in Jammu and Kashmir and Rajasthan. Iran also has recently discovered a vast deposit of lithium in the Hamadan province. So these real world commodities and resources will form the backbone of the BRICS currency, and gold obviously is going to be a prominent part of that. The US dollar is only backed by the US military's dominance and its declining hegemony. The arrival of this BRICS currency will deal a serious blow to the position of the dollar as the world's most dominant currency. And meanwhile, African nations are beginning to also move away from the US dollar. The African Export Import Bank, Afreximbank, will soon start settling payments in local African currencies. So we are witnessing the beginning of the process of de-dollarization. A few weeks ago, the 10 members of ASEAN in Southeast Asia also agreed to accelerate de-dollarization. So the use of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency is in serious decline and in serious danger. And with every nation that rejects the US dollar as the reserve currency, the US government will pay a higher price for printing US dollars. Inflation will increasingly hurt the US more than other nations. And in the meanwhile, the US national debt is spiraling out of control. It has reached unprecedented levels. So this threatens America's long-term economic stability, and it constrains the US government's ability to invest in domestic priorities and maintain its global leadership. So the US system is failing. Banks are collapsing. Some banks have collapsed. The prices of essentials are rising, and they are going to continue to rise. And this situation benefits the billionaires, but it hurts the individual person and the individual investor. So, what can nations like India and the BRICS nations and the global South nations do to hedge against the prospect of a failing US dollar? Well, their central banks will invest in reliable stores of value, such as other currencies that are stronger and less prone to inflation, and in proven commodities and precious metals, such as gold. And central banks are currently buying record amounts of gold. The global central bank gold purchases are currently at an all time high. So, the US is in visible decline. It still has the most powerful military. It still is the only superpower. But its trump card, the US dollar, the world's reserve currency since 1944, is in trouble. And things are going to get worse. And that is a guarantee. So that's the news update part of this video. Now I want to introduce you to the sponsor for today's video, which is directly tied to the demand for pulling gold out of the ground. This is a company that's listed on the NASDAQ stock exchange. They are a gold producer called US Gold Mining Incorporated. Here is their stock ticker USGO on NASDAQ. As of this recording, they are trading at $11.65 a share. The stock is up over 28% since it IPO'd on April 20 this year. Now, here's why this is a great stock to buy. The price of gold is currently reaching all-time high levels. It's currently trading at $1958 per ounce as of today's recording. Central banks, like I said, are buying record quantities of gold right now. And the Bank of America recently announced that it thinks gold will hit $2,500 per ounce this year. So as the dollar continues to collapse, the demand for gold will only grow. So this is the best possible time to invest in gold. So here are three reasons why I am very bullish on this company, US Gold. Firstly, the CEO is a legend in gold production. It's like getting the Sachin Tendulkar of gold production to run your company. Secondly, no one knows this company right now. It's flying under the radar, so that's another reason why it's so great. And thirdly, it's terribly underpriced, undervalued right now. No one knows about it. They're sitting on 9.4 million ounces of gold mineral resource in the Yukon in Alaska. And there's more. The tight ownership structure of the stock. So 81% of the stock is owned by just one owner, and they have no plans to sell the company until they can build up the company, and they will then sell the company. So only the outstanding shares are available for us to buy. Only 19% of the shares are available. So let's break these things down a little bit further so that you can do your own research on this. At the top of the list is the CEO, Tim Smith. Tim Smith is a legend in finding and extracting gold. He has an excellent track record. He knows how to create successful gold companies and then sell them for a huge profit. This means that investors make a lot of money. US Gold waited almost a year to get Tim Smith as the CEO. They wanted him for his proven track record in this area of the Yukon because he was the head of exploration for another company that found gold in the Yukon territory in the past. He knows this area inside and out. He was instrumental in the sale of that company for over $500 million. He is one of the last people to sell a gold company in Alaska. So he knows how to develop a gold mining project in the exact area where US Gold is now drilling for gold on the Whistler project. So in this business, you need people who have done exactly the business model that US Gold needs to do. If more drilling is to be done between existing holes, you can upgrade the category and now they'll be worth more. So this business works exactly like a startup. Eventually a giant buys you out, and that's what US Gold wants. They will build up the company, they will develop the project, they will make great gold discoveries, and then they will sell to a giant multi-billion dollar company and make a lot of money for themselves and for the shareholders. The second reason why I'm bullish about this company is the valuation. So firstly, US Gold has no debt. None at all. Second, it has a market cap of $160 million and a cash position of $20 million. So if you do the math, that's an enterprise value of $140 million. And they have a gold equivalent resource of 9.4 million ounces at the Whistler Gold Project in Yukon, Alaska. So if you divide the enterprise value by the gold amount, you find that their gold trades for less than $15 per ounce. Imagine buying gold at $15 an ounce. Like we just saw, it's currently trading at 1958 dollars per ounce. So it's incredibly undervalued. That's what the stock is. And for other companies in this area, the going rate is about $30 to $40 per ounce. US gold is at half the going rate. So if this company's stock doubles, you're gonna be at the average going rate. So once again, talk about undervalued. US gold currently trades at $15 an ounce. Tim Smith sold his previous company at $130 per ounce. So you can see the disparity there. US gold is massively undervalued. No one knows the company right now. It's flying under the radar. The stock is at a beautiful price point, and once analysts start doing their thing and the company becomes a well-known entity, things will change. The third reason I'm bullish about this company is the tight ownership structure of the stock. So, like I said, 81% of the company is owned by just one entity, one owner. When they start drilling and they hit gold and the media and the analysts start talking about them, there could potentially be a bidding war for shares on the open market on the NASDAQ. So, there is a short window to make some great money before the big players start buying shares of the company. So, take what I'm showing you here, do your own research, do your own due diligence on this company, on this stock, before the big players get there, because in 2 to 3 months, the share price could look totally different from what it is right now. This is a cash-rich company with no debt. Their gold is trading at half the current rate compared to other companies in the area. It's at $11.65 a share as of this recording. It's up over 28% since the company IPO'd. Here is the ticker again on your screen, USGO at NASDAQ. I am giving you the info so that you can check it out for yourself, do your own research, do your due diligence. Gold is a great investment. It's a great way to make sure that corrupt governments and bankers don't get control of your finances. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.